The antihero, defined as a central character in a story, movie, or drama who lacks conventional heroic attributes. In anime and manga, most commonly in shonen stories, our protagonist is usually a hero. I want to be the Hokage, or I want to be the Pirate King, or I want to save this person or that person, and the list goes on. Not that this is a bad thing at all. In fact, when done right, a heroic character can be exceptionally intriguing in his or her own way. But that's not the topic of this video. This video is centered around the anti-hero and what exactly makes this seemingly uncommon character trait so intriguing to the audience, specifically in anime and manga, because that's what my channel is about. I'll only be using examples from series that I've personally seen because it would just be unfair if I talked about a character I didn't even know. So if you don't see X character being talked about, then too bad, so sad. I just haven't had the time to check out his or her series. This video is not intended to be presented in a biased way. I'm not saying the anti-hero is always better than a hero. I'm simply talking about what makes them so good. If you like the video, then like it, and if you really like the video, then subscribe. Okay, let's talk about the intrigue of an anti-hero in anime and manga. The reason an anti-hero can be so appealing early on is because of the simple fact that they provide a different perspective to the reader. With a heroic character, we're almost always thrown in the perspective of good intentions and good morals. An example of a morally good protagonist is Ichigo from Bleach. His only real goal in the story is saving people or saving the Soul Society. Arc after arc, Ichigo seeks to protect. In the Soul Society arc, he protects Rukia. In the Arrancar arc, he protects Orihime, and in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, he protects the Soul Society and ultimately the world. I'm not saying Ichigo is a bad character by any means. I'm simply pointing out the fact that he gives the reader a certain perspective that is contrary to the perspective that an anti-hero presents. The intentions of a heroic character are almost always good, and no real evil is done. Sometimes you might really want to beat the crap out of a character on the screen, but your main character just won't do it because they're too kind and won't dare touch their friends. The anti-hero says, screw your friend, and beats the crap out of them anyway. Within all of us, there is hatred. No matter how calm you are, no matter how many times you reread Vagabond, no matter how long you meditate for, there is hatred within you somewhere deep down. Whether it be hatred for the cruel world, hatred for a certain person, event, or place. The anti-hero follows through with these evil intentions. This creates a certain connection with the audience as their morally wrong ideas can be displayed through their character. Take Lelouch for example. He believes that the world is a cruel and disgusting place and wishes to make it better for his sister Nunnally to live in. The reader can sympathize more with this idea of making the world a better place for a certain person that they love, rather than a goal they themselves don't even care about at all. Lelouch commits genocide throughout the story of Code Geass for the sake of protecting the one he cares about, and of course he has the goal of liberating Japan, or I guess in this case the 11s, from Britannia's rule. While genocide is not at all justifiable through the eyes of the reader, it makes sense why the character went down the path of endless killing. This is because the anti-hero's ideals and beliefs are developed through a first-person point of view, making the destructive act of genocide or anything of that nature seem reasonable to their character. Eren Yeager is another great example of an anti-hero that does this. Because he saw no other way to protect his people, his island, and the future of his friends, he saw fit to annihilate 80% of humanity. Again, genocide is not justifiable, and that's not my point. What I'm saying is that these actions committed by an anti-hero gain more sympathy from the reader than it would otherwise through an antagonist, as we don't see the story from their perspective. As I just mentioned, Lelouch and Eren were similar in the way that both of them fought to protect someone or a large group. Let's add Guts from Berserk to this idea as well. The idea of fighting to protect. We all know Guts' tragic backstory. If you don't, then I humbly apologize. His backstory in which he loses everything he ever had except for Casca, his mentally scarred lover. At first, seeing Guts the way he is seems unethical to the clueless reader and doesn't really make much sense in the context that it's presented in, until you read the Golden Age arc. This arc provides everything and anything you need to know about the tragedy behind the anti-hero you've been presented with, and allows you to understand why he commonly committed such gruesome acts. Bro cut a random dude in half in the first chapter because he felt like it, and yet this action makes sense once you gain context. When a protagonist is the quote-unquote villain of the story, it allows for the reader to see villainous acts through a first-person point of view. For example, take an antagonist like Pain from Naruto. His actions at first don't make any sense, but when his true intentions and purpose are revealed, he makes for an incredibly well-written antagonist. Except because he's the antagonist, we can't really see the story entirely in his perspective because we're seeing everything that unfolds through the perspective of Naruto, the protagonist. Attack on Titan specifically does an incredible job of displaying different perspectives, and while I personally believe it does this idea best of any anime or manga, it's still hard to deny the fact that the story is being presented through Eren's eyes as he is the protagonist. The reason a villainous protagonist like Eren is so loved is because we grew up with him throughout the story and we see him change from, again, a first-person point of view. With an anti-hero protagonist like Eren, we grow up with him and continuously see his growth episode after episode or chapter after chapter, as opposed to an antagonist whose backstory is usually thrown at us during a crucial point in the story. However, you could make a debate about that last point because we do sort of grow up with certain antagonists. Griffith from Berserk and Johan from Monster are examples of antagonists who we see develop throughout each arc. Being able to see what the anti-hero experiences and learns through a first-person point of view creates a strong bond between the reader and the anti-hero protagonist, making him or her more appealing to the reader. Did I also mention the fact that most of the time, an anti-hero protagonist is presented in a darker setting? For example, Attack on Titan, Berserk, Vinland Saga, Code Geass, and even Vagabond early on. Each series has an example of an anti-hero within it, and they're all relatively dark stories. This allows for realistic and sometimes brutal themes to be presented through this villainous character. Like Guts, for example, who has to recover from PTSD throughout the whole story pretty much, Eren, who has to deal with being trapped in a cage his whole life, or Lelouch having to learn that it takes evil to destroy evil. Each are perfect examples of dark themes being presented through the character. A common trait that makes an anti-hero so loved is mystery. I've used Eren and Guts frequently in this video, but I'm gonna use them both again here just because of how well they fit this idea. What writers tend to do, at least from what I see, with their antagonists or even villainous protagonists is that they quickly establish their goal in the story. Lelouch, an anti-hero himself, has a goal that is displayed at the beginning of the story. Griffith, in my eyes, the best antagonist in anime manga, has a goal that is shown to us early on in the Golden Age and is teased even earlier. Let's talk about Guts. At the beginning of the Black Swordsman arc, Guts' intentions are completely hidden from the reader. His looks, his personality, his power, and his intentions all become a massive bundle of questions for the reader. As I mentioned before, his goals at the beginning of the story make no sense, and his merciless killing is unjustifiable at first. Then you see his backstory and realize that it all makes sense. From that point on, his goal of destroying Griffith and saving Casca is established. But something even deeper in mystery occurs through the characters of specifically Guts and Eren. And this deeper mystery is not easy to create by any means. Both of them commonly have these monologue scenes, more so with Guts, so let's talk about him first. While we know his real intentions, Guts' personality and unconscious ideals are all a mystery that Miura geniusly used to develop the Beast of Darkness. This presents a brutal side of Guts that proves to be mysterious and realistic at the same time, and allows us to question what his real intentions are. It also displays what he really has to go through psychologically pretty much every day. There's a reason why I consider him the greatest protagonist ever. Eren, on the other hand, is different in a way. His intentions are immediately introduced into the story, being to destroy the Titans and achieve freedom. What's interesting about Eren is that he starts off as a heroic character but later becomes the villain. He's one of the few examples of a heroic character changing drastically, and yet it makes so much sense. Through this drastic change, his goals change too, except we don't know this. Isayama teases us by showing flashbacks of Eren saying he wishes to protect those he cares about, but then shows us Eren beating the living crap out of those exact people. This creates, you guessed it, mystery. From the Marley arc to the end of the story, Eren's true intentions are never completely known. I'd argue that even with the ending, his intentions still aren't revealed completely. Why do you think hundreds of Eren analysis videos have come out and yet everyone still has a different perspective on him as a character? It's because of this exact memory that is developed from the Marley arc to the end of the story. Does he really want to destroy the world? Does he want to protect his friends? Does he want to protect Paradise Island? Does he love Mikasa? All these questions stay unanswered until the end, and yet because we've grown up with Eren as the protagonist, we follow him regardless of what his intentions are. Because of this exact mystery, I find Eren to be one of the most appealing protagonists ever. So to conclude, what makes the anti-hero so intriguing? Is it their morals, their beliefs, or their badass design? Of course, this is all subjective, but at the end of the day, there is no denying the fact that the anti-hero being so different from the heroic protagonist makes him appealing, and the fact that we see the story from a villainous perspective for a change is quite appealing, I must say. We also get to see this character grow and develop through so many different ways, proving that the anti-hero character can be a genius method of writing. I hope you now understand the intrigue of an anti-hero.